I'll admit I've never been the biggest fan of Oklahoma quarterbacks, especially under Bob Stoops. See Sam Bradford, see Landry Jones. To me, they were always one-read system guys with limited arm talent, limited mobility, and a propensity for getting hurt. See Sam Bradford. So, as we started to get ready for the 2017 college football season, I would occasionally get a question about Baker Mayfield and his draft stock and so on and so forth. I wasn't feeling it. I'm like, there's no way. This midget can't play in the National Football League. And that was the thought. I'm like, he's a system guy, he's a shrimp, he's this, he's that, and all of the things, more importantly, that I thought he wasn't. But it was funny as the season went along, and he had this great year, and he ends up winning the Heisman Trophy. He leads the Sooners to the college football playoff. I started to warm to him a little bit. I started to understand what more people were seeing. And I feel like it's really been interesting over the past few months to go from a Baker Mayfield, who I thought was going to be an incredibly polarizing prospect, to a guy that a lot of people are very comfortable with a team taking in the first round, even in the top 6 picks. Like, they look at Baker Mayfield, and I feel like there are more people right now that are more comfortable with Baker Mayfield being the number 1 quarterback in this draft, even at 6 foot half an inch, than any of the other big names in this class. Darnold, Rosen, Allen, Lamar Jackson, doesn't matter. Like, somehow we metamorphosized into this weird space where now Baker Mayfield is kind of viewed as like the safest of the quarterback prospects in this draft class. And to me, that's crazy. Because while I said I've warmed on him, I don't think he's a slam dunk pick. But he's most certainly better than Josh Rosen. But as you look at him, you've got some of the concerns about the off-the-field stuff, the size, and you'll get the comparisons to Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football. Is Baker Mayfield going to be Johnny Football 2.0? And I understand once you get past just the size, and yes, just like Manziel, even though Manziel was more like 5'11", and Baker Mayfield 6 foot half an inch, they're not the biggest guy. They most certainly aren't what you would think of when you go up to somebody and say, make me a quarterback out of granite. You're not making Johnny Manziel, and you're most certainly not making Baker Mayfield. They just don't look the part of the franchise quarterback. They just don't have that size that jumps off the screen at you and says, that's the dude, that's the guy. And then you see, with that lack of size, a lack of pocket presence. To me, honestly, with both guys, pocket presence that left a lot to be desired, where Manziel automatically was looking to run the first chance he got. Baker Mayfield sometimes can get really happy feet. He does the old Rex Grossman turn. You know, Saxy Rexy. Rex is our quarterback, where he has this really bad habit of turning his back on the defense to turn and tuck tail and run to get out of the pocket. And he screws up his protection and so forth. But just in general, he gets really impatient in the pocket. He's not calm in the pocket. He has a tendency still to roll out of the pocket quite a bit when he doesn't need to. He doesn't always have the best grasp of knowing when to move up and back within the pocket, moving side to side within the pocket, very similar to Johnny Football. And then you've got the questions about the attitude, character, transitioning to an NFL system. And look, when it comes down to the most clear-cut comparison to Manziel, it is some of the off-the-field stuff. I mean, you're talking about the arrest that he had this past offseason. You're talking about some of the baggage that potentially comes along. There's thoughts that his dad could be really difficult to deal with, that Baker Mayfield's kind of an arrogant prick, and the way he conducted himself when the Chicago Bears scout asked him for an interview saying, what the hell do you want with me? You just drafted Trubisky. It's funny, but it is also something that could potentially be a little concerning, because you wonder if he's too full of himself to ever be able to be coached. You wonder if he's going to get to the league and think he's that dude, and then he never actually becomes that dude. And then you wonder, he's had some off-the-field issues already. Is he going to have more of them, especially when he gets money and he gets the attention that comes with being an NFL starting quarterback and potentially a high first-round draft pick? Those are valid concerns. And in those aspects that I named, you can make a comparison to Johnny Football to a degree, but it is only to a degree. He is bigger than Manziel. His pocket presence, while not good, is still better than Manziel's ever was. His attitude seems to be much better, because where you could say that Johnny Manziel was too distracted on all the other BS that came around with being a Heisman-winning star college quarterback, that Baker Mayfield, while he has an attitude and he's doing dumb crap like sitting there trash-talking Kansas, like, who in the hell is Kansas to even be worth trash-talking and grabbing your junk at? It's just not the same. And when you talk about football character and so forth, that's where it really splits itself off. And Baker Mayfield significantly differentiates himself from Johnny Football. Which brings you to the Russell Wilson comparison, which is also going to be inevitable. The arm strength is much better than he's given credit for, I think similar to Russell Wilson. But I've seen that a lot with Baker Mayfield, and it was funny. I feel like I've graded his arm out from an arm strength and velocity and power standpoint better than most anybody else has. I think his arm is very good. I think his arm is underrated. And again, I think his arm strength is a little bit better than Josh Rosen's, especially the way it flashes and shows on film. I think his mechanics are pretty solid, similar to Russell Wilson. He has times where his accuracy and ball placement can be absolutely special, just like Russell Wilson, although I think Baker Mayfield coming out of college has a better track record in terms of accuracy than a Russell Wilson does. I think it's a better trait for him than it was for Wilson coming out of NC State/Wisconsin. He can see the whole field. He can go through progressions. It's always been one of the biggest knocks I have against Oklahoma starting quarterbacks. It's so much of a one read and throw system that they don't bother to go through progressions. They don't bother moving safeties. They don't bother trying to see the whole field and going to a second or third option. Well, in 2017, I saw Baker Mayfield do that pretty consistently, something that Russell Wilson has been able to do at the NFL level. He's also a relatively good decision maker, Baker is. I mean, granted, he has a sporadic brain fart moment, and it could be a frustrating thing for a coaching staff of the NFL to deal with initially, and maybe something you always have to deal with. But in general, he does take pretty good care of the ball and makes pretty good sound decisions. And he's also a really good athlete who can extend plays within the pocket with his athleticism and his mobility, and extend plays out of the pocket with his feet, and just make plays happen with his feet, both as a thrower and as a runner. While I don't think he's a perfect comparison for Russell Wilson, he's much closer to a Russell Wilson than he is a Johnny Manziel. And I feel like the Johnny Manziel comparison is just flat out lazy. There are a couple of commonalities, but that doesn't automatically mean they're one and the same, because they're just not. They're just not. I think for Baker Mayfield, when it comes to transitioning to the NFL, it's going to be important to learn lessons from both Johnny Manziel and Russell Wilson. From Johnny Manziel, you learn how not to conduct and carry yourself. For Russell Wilson, you'll learn how to conduct and carry yourself. Obviously, you're going to have a little more swagger and a little more flair to what you do, but follow the model of Russell Wilson and how he was able to adjust his game, be able to find passing lanes, be able to extend plays, and be able to make plays at a high level at the quarterback position in the NFL. What to me really stands out the most about Baker Mayfield is his ability to be an alpha dog amongst men. And I think that's going to be an important thing for him to have in his back pocket when you get to the National Football League. Especially coming in, he's probably going to have a reputation. Some guys are going to wonder about this dude and his behavior, his attitude, his mindset. But this is a dude, and you can see it, you can sense it. You saw it, I thought, at the Senior Bowl week. You saw it throughout his last couple of years at Oklahoma. He was a leader of that team. He could lead men. They bought into him, and they believed in him, and they got on board with him, got behind him, whatever the hell you want to say. He's got that. He's got that to me in great abundance. Granted, I still have concerns about taking a 6-foot quarterback potentially in the top 5. I still have to say there are concerns to me about this guy off the field. And a lot of guys I see that typically do scouting reports don't incorporate these things. And they should be. They should be incorporated because they could potentially be an impediment to him reaching his full potential at the NFL level. I have concerns about a guy that previously had a knee injury, sitting there and going to the NFL with his playing style at his size. Could injuries be a problem? And him ultimately lacking the number one ability of a franchise NFL quarterback, that is availability. He was available plenty at Oklahoma, granted, but the NFL is where the big boys play. But I look at him, and I see a guy with the arm strength, the athleticism, the mobility, to at least at the floor, if he doesn't get himself out of the league because of stupid crap, he's going to at least be an above-average NFL starting quarterback. I believe that. I've seen enough traits to sit there and say, I feel like this guy could be a 10 to 12-year starter. Is he going to be a stud? Is he going to be a superstar? I don't know. But I feel like, similar it seems like to a lot of others, that he has a pretty good floor. I don't know if his ceiling is the roof. Thank you for that, Michael Jordan. I don't know if his ceiling as the roof is as high as others like Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Lamar Jackson. I think they've got higher pure ceilings, but his floor is much higher than all of those guys. And I think some teams are going to look at that and they're going to agree. Now, you're going to look at my grading and say, you've got a grade of 84 on him. He's a third-round pick in your eyes. You must be insane. Well, keep this in mind. When I do my grading, it is my best attempt without thinking of a specific team, a specific system, quarterback-coach relationship, the inability to do my own personal background research on him all the way to interview him face-to-face. I've got to go with the best of what I can put together. And I grade for things like intangibles, size. So you think about this, those are the two areas where he gets the most bumped down from me. And keep in mind, too, that when you look at my grades, I'm pretty hard on the quarterbacks. Like, I loved Patrick Mahomes in last year's draft, but he was still like a mid-second round grade to me. He was. But I look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, and if he didn't have some of those off-the-field concerns and he was 6'3", 6'4", then he's a first-round talent. And if teams don't care about the size and they're not worried about the off-field stuff, he most certainly is a first-round talent. I still think he's just a tad overrated. I don't think he ends up being the best quarterback in this class, but I feel much more confident about him ultimately panning out at the NFL than I do Josh Rosen. I think Baker Mayfield lives, eats, breathes, swallows, shits football. And I can't say the same about Rosen. When I look at NFL comparisons for Baker Mayfield, two Bears quarterbacks come to mind. From a modern sense, Trubisky. I see similarities. Not the biggest guy, although Trubisky was a little bigger, but guys with pretty good arms. They could make some real special throws. They had special throw-making ability for the NFL level. They were guys that were very good athletes with their feet. There were things to really like about them. The other guy that I compare Baker Mayfield to, if we go back in the historical time machine, is going to be Jim McMahon, the old punky QB. Jim McMahon had that alpha dog in him. Jim McMahon had that leader of men about him when he wanted to. The trick was keeping him on the field healthy, but when he was there, that Bears team of the 80s was dangerous. The problem was he just wasn't on the field enough. He just couldn't stay damn healthy. But when he was there, he had a freaking strong arm. He was accurate. He could lead this team. He could make adjustments and audibles. He could make plays with his feet. He could run. He could sit there and move out of the pocket and throw. I mean, he could do a lot of things. People forget about and sleep on Jim McMahon. And I see quite a bit of Jim McMahon in Baker Mayfield. Like I said, I warmed on him as a prospect. And I still stand by my grading based off of how I grade. It is a fair and accurate representation of who he is. And if you look at the grading, I feel like you will agree with me. That said, I will understand if a team takes a gamble on him in the first round. I personally probably wouldn't do it until pick 20 or after, but somebody's going to take this guy in the top 6 and probably feel pretty good about themselves.